Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us in this sunny afternoon. We're very happy to have you here. My name is Jorge Ventosilla. I'm working with the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences in Brussels, and I will be facilitating this session today on science policy interface. I will first introduce our speakers. We have Gilles Dognon. He's a marine, Gilles joined the European Commission in 2008, spent 10 years at DG Maritime Affairs and Fisheries, 4 years at DG Environment, and in 22 he became a team leader on biodiversity and nature-based solutions at DG Research and Innovation. We have with us as well Robin. There you go. Robin Goffo, he's a project manager at the French Foundation for Biodiversity Research, FRB. He works on biodiversity and agriculture topics, science policy facilitation, synthesis of knowledge, and is involved in several working groups. Since 2019, he has served as French national focal point to the CBD SUBSA. Robin is involved in COP for CBD, one of the projects being presented today, as work package leader. Well, he helps to mobilize European expertise for European negotiators on the CBD. We have also with us Carlos Hernandez. He's a senior specialist in international affairs and cooperation at the Humboldt Institute in Colombia. He's trained as a political scientist with a master's degree in international affairs and has more than 10 years of experience working for the public sector and the Colombian government in international cooperation for science, technology, and innovation. We also have Leonard from the German Federal Agency for Nature Conservation, BFN, which was founded in 1993 to scientifically support the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety, and Consumer Protection with respect to nature conservation. At its International Academy for Nature Conservation on the island of Velm since more than 20 years, it organizes for CBD SUBSA meetings. It also helps to coordinate the implementation of the German National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. And we also have with us Sunita Chaudhry. She is a biodiversity lead at ICIMOT, the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development in Nepal, where she is responsible for research, policy inputs, capacity building, and advocacy, and contributes to the interface of science, policy, and practice. She's also a member of the National Council of Environmental Protection and Climate Change Management under Nepal's Prime Minister's Office, and a lead author of the IBES Nexus Assessment. She's also a steering committee member of Mountain Biodiversity Assessment, hosted by universities of Bern and Lausanne, Switzerland. Dr. Sunita has 15 years of experience on natural resources management in Australia, Austria, and the Hindu Kush Himalaya. Her applied and interdisciplinary work focuses on human-nature interactions of terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. If we could all welcome our speakers with a applause, please. Perfect. And last but not least, he just joined us. We have David Obura. We're happy to see you. He's a founding director of Cordio East Africa, shares the intergovernmental platform on biodiversity and ecosystem services, IBES, between 2023 and 2026, and is on the Earth Commission. Cardio is a knowledge organization supporting sustainability of coral reefs and marine systems in the West Indian Ocean. David's primary research has been on coral reef resilience, biogeography, and climate change impacts. His interests are turning now towards sustainability science, pivoting around coastal, African, and societal needs and priorities in the broader sustainable development paradigm. David works from the local scale through fostering innovative action to promote sustainability, through regional scale alignment and interaction to global scales. David was co-chair of the IBES Nexus Assessment and was active in compiling science input into the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. David was awarded Kenya's National Honor, Moran of the Burning Spear in 2021, and the Coral Reef Conservation Award of the International Coral Reef Society in 2022. And now I will present my colleague Constance Laurent, who will give a brief introduction. First, we'll have Jill, who will give a brief introduction on what is the importance of these projects for the European Commission.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm coming from DG Research and Innovation, so in a way I am the bank funding the projects, and at DG Research and Innovation we fund thousands and thousands and thousands of projects. But you are very, very lucky today because we have the 4 most important ones on biodiversity for us. Let's say the 3 musketeers. I don't know which one is D'Artagnan. Maybe we can discuss that. But I will start by order of chronological order. So the first one is BioAgora. So I don't know who is involved in BioAgora. Yeah, we have some. So BioAgora started on the 1st of July 2022 and will end on the 30th of June 2027. And the main objective of this project is to set up the science service for biodiversity within the knowledge center for biodiversity, KCBD. So in a way, it's really to ensure that when there are some questions from policy DGs, KCBD is able to reply in terms of science. If not directly, they activate the science service for biodiversity, and then this service will look for the right information, the right experts. And they will probably be in charge of the long-term strategic research agenda for biodiversity. I'm just waiting for one green light from my hierarchy. So that's the first one. The second one, the first one that started actually was Biodiversa Plus. So who is in Biodiversa Plus? Voilà. So Biodiversa Plus, and it was a follow-up of the project Biodiversa 3. So Biodiversa Plus is the EU partnership on biodiversity, involving 83 partners, institutions from 41 countries with a total budget of 800 million. So we are talking about big money for biodiversity. And this specific Biodiversa Plus started on the 1st of October 2021 and will stay until 30th of September 2028. And here the meaning is really to have extra projects, so not directly under the topics of our research funding program Horizon Europe, but really the right project for specific key issues, and also, of course, to reinforce all the collaboration with the member states. And actually, the EU funding is 165 million, and the rest is coming from the member states. The third one, COP for CBD. So I don't know who is there. We have a winner. So COP for CBD, you understand with the name, is really to support the work of the convention. It's really about engaging experts and facilitate technical and scientific cooperation, really to ease the process of the CBD and of the EU with the CBD. So the project started on the 1st of December 2022 until the 30th of November 2026. And then we have the last kit, the new kit on the block, so RESPIN. So who is from RESPIN? Okay. So maybe D'Artagnan. RESPIN started on the 1st of January of this year, so quite young, but already providing a lot of input and a wonderful side event. So really congratulations. And RESPIN is really to help the links between IBES and IPCC. As you know, we have the climate crisis, the nature crisis. We really have to consider both together, and nature being our best ally. So all the process to help between the two key bodies providing scientific input to the UN bodies. And very probably you will say much more about RESPIN. But so really, you are very lucky because in this room are the 4 main, most important projects of biodiversity funded by the EU right now. Voilà.
Thank you very much, Gilles, with that introduction, which definitely sets the bar very high. And now, with that teaser, my colleague Constance will give a very short presentation with providing more details on the projects.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Gilles, for this introduction. I will try to make mine not too long and not to repeat too much what you said, because you gave all of the necessary information. It's totally fine. I'm going to, go there. Okay. A warm welcome to our first side event on Science Policy Interface, also called SPI. This first side event is going to be shared into 2 sessions, one on SPI landscape, and the second one on the role of this SPI on the implementation and monitoring of the KM-GBF. Okay, so you could see, Gilles introducing all of the 4 projects. Don't hesitate at the end of the event to come across the person you could have identified. And to start, what are SPI? If we consider IPBES definition, environment-related SPI are organizations, initiatives, or projects that work at the boundary of science, policy, and society to enrich decision-making, shape their participants' and audiences' understandings of problems, and so produce outcomes regarding decisions and behaviors. In order to do so, however, a proactive articulation of policy needs regarding scientific information is crucial, as well as the time and resources to dedicate for the interaction in science policy interface. This will provide the basis for the knowledge holder to again refine and target the research. It is very important to underline that this interface is absolutely working both sides. It is not a one-way road, but a co-construction mechanism. And I would say this is maybe the importance of this project. After IPBES and IPCC being SPI, these are the new kind of SPI that are supporting their activities. If each of our projects intervene specifically into this framework and take place in different spots in this global ecosystem made of knowledge holders in biodiversity or climate, and then IPBES and IPCC, and then UNFCCC, CBD, if each of our projects intervene specifically into this framework and take place in different spots in this global ecosystem made of knowledge holders in biodiversity or climate, and then IPBES and IPCC, and then UNFCCC, CBD, and European Commission. So you can see where like, for example, COP4CBD is situated at the interface between knowledge holder in biodiversity and CBD. RESPIN is at the interface between knowledge holder and IPBES and IPCC. BioAgora makes the link with the needs of the European Union, and Biodiversa could be put a little everywhere, but in particular in the consolidation of the knowledge holder community. COP4CBD stands for Cooperation for the CBD that has begun 2 years ago. And maybe I will share our activities as maybe the goals are already, I guess, somehow clear. So among our activities, there is expert and negotiator dialogues. There is training on the use of the clearinghouse mechanism in Bioland. There is training on technical and scientific cooperation on CBD processes. And there is production of technical briefs and outreach activities to promote engagement and involvement in the CBD. So if COP4CBD is aimed at CBD, RESPIN project is mostly aimed at other SPI, IPBES, and IPCC. You can see it down there. RESPIN is a new project which started earlier this year with the mission to strengthen synergies, policy support, and knowledge uptake of IPBES and IPCC. A lot has been done in this topic, and first steps are to analyze the experience with support and capacity building for IPBES and IPCC processes. Among activities, there is empowering knowledge holder and to create a network of IPBES and IPCC focal points in Europe and Central Asia, and also to support the creation of similar network in Latin America and Central Africa. There is also identifying processes and enabling conditions to improve the knowledge uptake. Also strengthening uptake in the science service mechanism as supported by BioAgora, producing webinars and policy briefs as an upscaling measure, and also to form strategic partnership to ensure diffusion of output projects. We mentioned BioAgora. As we could say before, formulating adequate responses to pressing challenges at the science policy interface requires effective and legitimate knowledge brokering. The overarching goal of BioAgora is the development of a fair and functional science service for biodiversity, which will facilitate the orchestration of processes and initiative at the SPI at the European level. The Science Service for Biodiversity has three overarching functions. One, transforming the processes with and between science and policy. Two, creating and supporting active thematic networks. And at the very core, the answering request function with the subsequent evidence-based building. To answer policy requests, BioAgora is testing different knowledge brokering mechanisms, and currently the prototype of a knowledge brokering mechanism tailored to EU-funded community. Here you see the schematic overview of the mechanism. We don't have time to get into details, but this mechanism will allow for a tailored response to policy requesters within weeks or months on urgent policy relevant issues. And to finish this presentation, Biodiversa, it is the European COP-funded biodiversity partnership supporting excellent research on biodiversity with an impact for policy and society. It is part of the European Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, and it connects science, policy, and practice towards transformative change for the sustainable use and conservation of biodiversity. It currently gathers 83 research programmers and funders and environmental policy actors from 41 European and associated countries to work on 5 main objectives, as you can see in the picture. So this was a small view on the projects. I will only highlight that we will share at the end of this session some QR code on RESPIN, one of the RESPIN functions. It is a questionnaire. Maybe if you can say a small word at the end of the session about it. Okay. Thank you so much. And
thank you very much, Constance. And now with that introduction, you have a better idea of what are the projects about and what we do. So we'll now dive into our panel discussion. And we will start with you, David. You have extensive experience with the IPBES, which is the SPI platform for biodiversity. In your experience, what facilitates the dialogue between science and policy, and what are the obstacles?
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. Apologies for my dramatic and very well-timed entry for my introduction. Yes, so I hope to contribute well to the process. I feel a bit nervous answering this for IPBES because there are many people in the room who have a lot of experience with IPBES and will have a lot of experience also and could add to this also. So from the time that I've spent, and I participated in the IPCC IPBES workshop report as well, so I sort of had some experience of some of the challenges of interlinkages between these science policy interfaces. So what facilitates the dialogue? So I have a list of 5 key things I think here. So one is the purpose of the science policy interface. It's incredibly important for it to be clear that it's demand driven, that there is a need for it, and there's a clearly stated demand in our case from the intergovernmental processes from countries under the UN system. So that provides the mandate for the dialogue between the science and policy that happens. The second key thing is the process, because I think the SPIs integrate so many different types of communities, that there has to be process involved in that dialogue and communication. Otherwise, it can become unclear, or people may do things in parallel. And so establishing some clear ground rules for how things move forward is very important. This is the co-part of co-design in terms of bouncing back and forth, perhaps between the policy and the science in a structured way, is very important. Of course, these structures are important, but they have to be able to adapt as well and to shift according to needs that are identified. I think a key part of this process also that's very important, and I think that's sort of captured in the projects you've described here, is the supporting processes for this science policy dialogue are very important. It's very complex to undertake it. We have a very clear structure with our secretariat in IPBES that supports this dialogue between the parties, the plenary, and the assessments and the science. But it needs some third parties as well to be involved in that. And I think these projects that you described and some of the networks that we engage with, like CABIS, around supporting dialogue in Africa with getting policymakers to understand more about IPBES, I think helps a lot. The content, of course, is critically important. That's the actual science or the policy needs. Being very clear about what those are, the importance of the scoping processes, so people agree on what is being addressed is very important, and that's part of the back and forth between the two. And then, of course, with the content, the expertise involved in the science policy process is very important, both within the science side, or the knowledge side, as we should say now, so not just science, but other knowledge systems as well, and with particular highlight on indigenous and local knowledge at the moment, but there are others as well. And expertise on the policy side as well, the ability to take that up and to express what is needed and to reflect on these things. Language is very important. It's very complex things we deal with, and we often use very different language between different components of the science policy process, and willing participants. The people involved, especially the key people, whether it's who lead on the science part or who lead and really make decisions on the policy side. We really need to carry things forward. I have fewer barriers, but they're important barriers. So funding and resources are obviously very important. But resources, I'd say, it's not just in terms of finance, but it's also, of course, enough inputs. That's data. The tools that we need to use to integrate information and to go back and forth is very important. And that's a lot to do with information, informatics. It's to do with communicating. It's to do with traveling and so on. So 2 key things that I think that are barriers that are very important to work on, and I certainly, think we can act on these moving forward. One is silos, and that's because sciences and policy processes have their own silos, and they get comfortable where they are. We need to continually question: are we designing it right, and should there be shifts? And that's the other sort of major barrier, is responsivity to the information, to the evidence, to the needs from policy side, to the science that's coming up. Being responsive to what we're finding out is critically important, because then that shows that we're actually learning from what we're finding out in this process. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, David. Even though that SPI seems so natural for some of them, for some of us, it's obvious that there is a need for a framework for it to take place, for it to work. Now we'll go to Robin. You are work package leader in COP for CBD. Could you please tell us more about the process of answering knowledge needs and the production of issue briefs?
Not now. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Jorge. Yeah, as you said, so I'm responsible for one work package of the COP for CBD project. And this work package is dedicated to the mobilization of the expertise in support of the CBD discussions. So it means for the European negotiator to the CBD. So I will explain shortly what this work package is about, but to replace it in a whole constellation of initiatives, we can understand it as standing one step before the field meeting that Leonard will speak about. So my presentation will be on three points. So the first point, it's convenient because it relies on other work packages of the project. So the idea with the mobilization of this expertise is on one side to identify the needs of knowledge and that the negotiator can have to support their discussion at the CBD. So CBD is a complex environment, and the idea is to also on the other side to identify the means that we can have and we can rely on to respond to these needs. So these means are experts, so knowledge holders. It can be scientists from the academics or from the civil society, and the idea is to mobilize these experts to help the discussions of the European negotiators. So I mentioned European because it's a European funded project, but actually in the project we have the member states, but also the countries from the eastern of Europe that are not in the Union. So the trick on this part is the experts, who they are, where they are, how we can mobilize them. So this is part of another work package I won't detail here. So my work package rely on this means and needs identification. And then the idea is to mobilize these experts to respond to these needs. So it can be done on several aspects. So on one part is to select the very expert that we can rely on to help on this process. So they are selected for their skills and the topics that has to be addressed through the work package. So, and the trick is that, as I said, CBD is a complex environment. So we also benefit from another work package of the project, which provides some training sessions, as Constance told you just earlier. So we have training session to help the people understand what is CBD, what is function, or what are the process. And on one part, on the other part, we also organize training sessions on the next topics to be discussed at CBD. So we try to have this expert aware of the current discussion. And what is important is we rely on knowledge and expertise. So we are not here to produce political briefs. So the idea is when we have these experts trained and skilled and aware of the CBD and the current discussions, the idea is to organize writing workshop, when we gather on one topic, these experts, and we made them produce technical issue brief. And then, so it's the third part, the feedback to the negotiator who have these needs at the first step. And so we organize dialogue on depending on the topic and the timing of the CBD process. There can be several occasions to deliver this technical issue brief. It can be at the field meeting, it can be in Brussels when the positions are discussed between all the member states. But we can also imagine new area of dissemination. And so just to not conclude, but to enlarge on one critical aspect of that is the separation of the experts and the political dimension. So we are very aware and we are trying not to be political, and this is really something we are trying to. And so we are trying several process and several way to do what I presented to you. For now, we, for example, organized a training session and writing for a workshop for the Substa 25 last year. But as I said, Substa and CBD is a very political arena. Substa is originally was to be scientific and technical, but actually it's already quite political. So we have to anticipate more and to see what are the scientific and technical work that will feed the discussion, and we have to anticipate more. So, for example, at the end of this COP16, there will be guidance asked through the decisions, new working groups, and the idea is to mobilize the expert and produce this technical brief to feed this work that then after will come to discussion at the Substa. So I think this is mainly it, and
Thank you for that presentation on how SPI is done at COP for CBD in a way or another. Carlos, yesterday you hosted a workshop on SPI with subnational authorities. What is the role of subnational authorities in integrating scientific input into national policy positions and processes?
Thank you, Jorge. Well, I want to start by saying something. I'm pretty sure that someone told this to you, but I don't want to miss the chance. Welcome to, we are the host right now, first time hosting a COP, so it was important for me and to this wonderful city that is Cali. Well, regarding the subnational workshop, within RESPIN, we are implementing a row of subnational workshops in some of the countries that are part of the project, mainly Colombia, the region of Catalonia, and Germany. And what we want to do is to understand the complexity of the subnational environmental ecosystems. So that's what we decided to take advantage of the momentum right now in COP16 here in Cali, and to make the subnational workshop within the Valle del Cauca region, that is, the regional government, which Cali is the capital city. So we invited to the workshop the municipalities around Cali, from Buga, Palmira, Guadalajara, and Jamundí, and some representatives from the municipality of Cali, the regional environmental authority, and we started to discussing with them. So at the end, and trying to answer your question, Jorge, the thing is, of course, the subnational authorities and the subnational governments inform, policy at the national level. But maybe the thing is, they are doing that with, I think, an important disconnection of the scientific advice. And I think that's the main problem and the main thing to address in the conversation. And that's one of the hypotheses from RESPIN. Myself, as national focal point for IDBES in Colombia, that was something I was thinking when I assumed the position like 1 year ago. And then I received the responsibility to be the coordinator for RESPIN in Colombia. So I was thinking on that. Why, when you mention IDBES, and I think that's something important, in the subnational level, you will only see faces of surprise in people, because they don't know what is IDBES or IPCC. Maybe IPCC could be more famous than IDBES. And you will find people doing their job and making policy, formulating policies, but you will not see clearly how that policies are linked to this big effort that is being implemented at the global level. And of course, and this is some kind of blaming myself because I'm the national focal point, why it's not easy, what is lacking to bring what is in the global level in the assessment from IDBES, the report from IPCC, to the subnational governments. That's the question that we want to answer. That's why we were doing the subnational workshop, because the answer for us right now is we don't know. We have not identified the problem. What is the problem? And let me tell you something very quick about the workshop yesterday, because it was really, really interesting on that, because we were asking the people, the ones that really make the policies and are working without knowing what is IPBES or IPCC saying. And many things, well, all the discussion pointed to many points. You can find there finance reason, or just the idea that the scientific knowledge is not being translated to a language that the decision maker could use it. But one point remained in my head, and for me it was very, very interesting, and it was that IPBES and IPCC are working with future scenarios and visions, and politicians, at least in Colombia, because I only want to talk about my country, they are thinking in the short term always. So for them, a vision that is, to be a reality in 10 or 20 years is not something so easy to sell to their voters in the process of the political election or something like that. And that's maybe one of the key reasons why the politicians are not so interested in hearing what the scientific advice have to tell them. And well, for me, it was something important because it wasn't something that I was thinking with when I assumed the position on the IPBES national focal point. And now I believe that's something structural that we'll need to address somehow. I don't know how, but that something was kind of enlightening to me in that moment. So as national focal point, there is no too much that I can do on that, but maybe that could be the start of a good conversation at the national level. And I mean, there I see clearly the advantage to have a project like RESPIN that is asking that kind of questions right now in this moment that we are talking about the complete integration between the agendas of biodiversity and climate change. And also that's something that IPBES and IPCC need to start thinking too. How can we reach really to the subnational level? Because in my point of view, they are not reaching this level. So that's something important. I mean, Jorge, I think I read the answer, but that was the main conclusion of the workshop for me. So
thank you very much for being so open and honest on your answer. Leonard, BFN has been organizing the VEL meeting for a number of years. For those that don't know about the VEL meeting, which is a very much an European, pan-European process, could you tell us a bit about it? What were the objectives when the concept was initiated, and have these changed over time?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and also very much for the invitation, which is quite nice to have this break from negotiations, actually. So I think in the very beginning it was what I learned, that experts meet on a remote place, had a look at SBSTA draft recommendations and discussed them, added some text where they think that might be very useful, and changed text in the draft recommendations where they thought that would be meaningful. And I think this still is the case. So we still work in a way that allows for exchange between people that are experts in different fields, actually. So we invite, for the film meetings, we do invite, we send out invites to the SBSTA national focal points, mainly from Europe. So it's not European Union, but it's Europe. And we ask them to send 1 or 2 people from their country on the items that are experts on the items of the upcoming SBSTA. So sometimes national focal points attend themselves. Sometimes they send others. So it's a good mix from scientists, for example, but also from national focal points, also from we also invite the chair of SBSTA, so it's not unusual that the person attends. And we also invite the secretariat as resource persons. So normally there are one or sometimes even two people from the secretariat attending our meetings to explain some of the matters we are going to discuss at the SBSTA meetings. Because also the draft recommendations are well prepared. They sometimes are being done in a rush as well. And it's really worth looking at them with fresh eyes. And this is something the film meeting, I think, can offer. So what is really important for us is that when we look at the draft recommendations, we have an introductory presentation by one expert on the matter that is explaining a bit of the context around the recommendations, and then presenting the recommendations and giving hints what he or she feels might be missing or might be improved, or where there is a chance or opportunity to enter new paragraphs, because SBSTA is the right place for this. And this is something I actually learned as well from these meetings, that we really need to explain. And this is what David said very well. I think explaining the processes of the other silo is so important. And if the people meet and the policy people can explain the procedures, when, for example, scientific input can be brought to a policy process leading to a CBD COP, for example, and the ideal point and time is when the draft recommendation is tabled. So this actually we learned, and we think that didn't change so much over time, even though recognizing what Robin already said, that SBSTA obviously is politicized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leonard. So despite having learned that SPI needs to have a clear framework, sometimes putting experts and scientists on a very isolated island for a couple of days also works. Thank you. Sunita, you have extensive experience in South Asia, a region with a long history of traditional ecological knowledge. Do you have any examples of best practices on how to incorporate traditional knowledge in the body of knowledge that is used to answer political needs? Policy needs, sorry.
Thank you so much for the question. So I will start with very straightforward example with my experience itself. And David is here. Pam, who is also co-chairing the Nexus assessment, is also here. And then how to integrate the indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge into the global or body of knowledge. So I come from one of the indigenous group of Nepal who lives in the Tarai belt, southern part of the Nepal. So now I'm also one of the lead authors of chapter 2 of the Nexus assessment. So bringing me is not only I'm bringing the scientific knowledge, but I'm also bringing my traditional knowledge, traditional experiences that I have brought up with myself. So that is an opportunity for me to integrate that connections with nature into this body of knowledge that IPBES is doing the assessment. So I think that is, and then IPBES now would be adopted. The Nexus assessment report will be discussed in the plenary on December and hopefully adopted. So I think that is one of the straightforward examples that I have experienced myself. The second example that I can give from my institution, that is ICIMOD, that stands for International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. What we do here is like we also do the assessment at regional scale on very specific like emerging issues like maybe glaciers or cryosphere melting. And then in this assessment, we not only invite the scientists, but also the local stakeholders like the Sherpa from the mountains. We invite them to share the experience, and also like the local women scientists who come, who are the exact like working directly interacting with the nature. So they come board, and then they are involved in the assessment. So after this regional assessment, what we do is like we generally organize SPD, which is like science policy dialogue, where we bring the scientific findings just like ICBES, and then also bring the policymakers on board. And then we come up with like few recommendations based on this SPD, science policy dialogue. And after that, we also organize the ministerial summit, where the ministers of the 8 countries, because ICIMOD is an intergovernmental organizations working in the 8 countries. So we invite ministers of the 8 countries. We discuss with them the policy recommendations coming out of the regional assessment, and then we request them to declare some concrete actions that can translate into the national and the local scale. So that is the process that we adopt at the regional level. And the last example I want to give is from Nepal. So, and that many of you might also know about the community forestry, which is one of the pioneer example across the world, how Nepal has progressed so far very well in community forestry. So if you see the history in 1950s, you might know the theory of Himalayan degradations. If you see and see the science, what it looked like in 1950s in Nepal, it looked like entire, the country is looking red, like with lots of landslides, soil erosion, flooding, and everything during 1950s. And that was because there was huge, like, you know, extraction of illegal logging of the forest, and the forest were cleared. So, and during that time, the theory of Himalayan degradation got a lot of attention. So, and after that, along with this theory of Himalayan degradation, the science also focused on what happened, what was the main reason for this degradation of Nepal. And then because of this science, the policymakers really got like, okay, what's happening with this? So then we, the government of Nepal really focused like what's happening, and then did detailed analysis. And there are a lot of like school of thoughts about different degradation, what are the factors. Then we have a policy on National Forest Act, which really recognize the traditional and the local knowledge of people that they are using, because that act really provides decentralized the forest system, management system to the local people. They handed over all the forest to many of the forest to the local people, and they were the one to managing the forest, utilizing the forest. And then if you see now after 40 years, so now we have around 45% of the whole land covered under forest. So if you see Nepal, you see green. So now we are saying that from red to green, the science has played an important role integrating the women's and local people's knowledge into the policy. And then recently we also have, because we might also know, there is a discourse on gender, inclusive integration in the policy. In the forestry sector, it's a male-dominated sector. So if you see, like at the local scale, still men are dominating the management and the users. But if you see 50 to 70% of our labor force, including the forest and agriculture sector, are women, but they are not in the policy arena anywhere. But recently, because of the science, because of the so many discourses, now the Constitution of Nepal itself has recognized that 50% of the forest users should be women. And then at least 33% should be in the executive committee. And then the women should also be in one of the leadership position, that if there will be any community forestry users groups. So you see how the science has really played an important role in Nepal in terms of also, now we already have a very specific Constitution Act on integration of gender policy in the forestry sector. So I think with these 3 examples, I would like to thank you all.
Thank you very much, Anita. I am a bit mindful of the time. I don't want to take time off from our colleagues that are giving the next session. But I would also like to open the floor for your questions. So in case you have any questions, please raise your hands and a microphone will come to you. Not all at the same time, please.
Thanks for the presentation. My name is Karuna Niemi and I come from far north, from Finland, and I represent the Finnish Forest Industries Federation. Thanks for the great presentations. I have one question to you, Carlos. You said about this, that IPES or IPCC results don't go through the national implementation and those challenges. And yeah, you said right that it is because of policy period is much shorter, so it's only a couple of years, 4 or 5 years. But because I represent the forest industry, so I see also that or IPCC results come, they don't take into account economic and social sustainability issues. So then these results come to national policy and national implementation. So the policymakers and decision makers, they also have to take into account social aspects and economic aspects. So that is also one thing which really affects that, because it's the whole sustainability, not only ecological part, even though this is really important. So that's my comment. And how do you feel that?
Well, thank you for that. And maybe I don't wanted to say that or being too hard in IPBES and IPCC, because I know the extent of what they do. And actually, I'm thinking more on, for example, if you have this assessment and reports and they only have the global level and they tell you this is how the local image is, and that's very clear and that's fine. See how you can translate it to your national context and with all the problem you have, because we will only advise you on the things related to our area of knowledge. Then you will need to include the sector if you want to have the big picture, right? In many things. But that is something that will be up to the governments at the national level to do. And let me tell you something that I try to bring every time I'm discussing this, because for Colombia was very helpful, because it was a more immersive study assessment of the Colombian reality. And it was the National Ecosystem Assessment in Colombia. That was an initiative supported by WCMC. And this particular assessment was an effort to use the IPBES methodology to the Colombian national context, but we changed many things. One of them was adding a biocultural chapter to the assessment that was trying to englobe all the consideration from the indigenous and local peoples, and even social conflicts and that kind of important things that sometimes, are left out the analysis. So at the end, my comment was more what can we do as governments to use the things that IPBES and IPCC produce with their limitations, budget limitation, etc. I mean, they do a very great job, but it was more what we can do to really use that information, translate it to the national level, and then the harder task, translate it to the sub-regional level. In a country like Colombia, in which you will find a really, really complex geography that isolate peoples, communities, and many things, that's something really important. And for sure, if you want to have a really good look of the picture in the country regarding biodiversity, climate change, you need to consider for sure economic and social problems. I totally agree with you.
That's on. Thank you. Yeah, no, I had actually wanted to respond on your comment as well, Carlos, because I think it's exactly the right comment, and we're reflecting on that sort of thing as well, and thinking forward, and then your comment as well from the floor. So just quickly, just so I don't take time away from other questions, is one thing is, to some extent, it's an issue of mandate, in that IPBES is a global intergovernmental science policy body mandated by governments, and our client for producing the reports is the government, and producing a summary for policymakers that is negotiated. The next step to having it used, of course, we want that to happen, because otherwise they don't have much impact. But that's not necessarily directly within our mandate or capacity to go beyond the single global report, which could be how you use it would be quite different in different regions or countries and subnational areas. How we're trying to work out how to do that. We're trying to work with partners who can take the assessments and then localize the findings so they can be used much more in a much more granular way. And we're exploring that now. And of course, we reach out to national focal points to do that as well. Our more recent assessments have a much more granular focus on actors and sectors. So the first ones that came out were very general, and as we did those, we identified gaps. So the Nexus assessment coming out that Pam McElwee is co-chairing, that is very focused on actors in sectors and what they can do and options available to them. And then to look out towards policy processes, towards how would countries support those actors in doing those actions is very important also. And then the other part is that as we've moved forward, the social dimension is coming in. I mean, it has been very strong from the beginning in NetBest because it's on biodiversity and ecosystem services. We're not a biodiversity assessment panel. We're looking at nature and how it supports economy and society. We have tended to focus on the social dynamics because we're trying to understand those. The economic aspects are, again, very granular and very different disciplines to really understand that. And we have a business and biodiversity assessment coming out next year, at the end of 2025. But even that, for a sector such as forestry, you'd have to look at that and really translate and deepen the findings for a particular country or context. But we really take on board these needs because that's where the real biodiversity loss and climate change impacts happen on the ground and need to be resolved.
Thank you. I'm still very mindful of the time. One last question. Anyone? Please.
Thank you. A very quick one. Just want to, okay, we're talking about formal platforms. I mean, that one created by a decree. So I want to ask if we can consider the role of informal structure. For example, in my country, in my region, where I'm working with farmers, etc., we created what we call a community of practice. So it's not a formal platform, etc., but it's, yeah, at some extent important just to share experiences and good practices. So sometimes it helps us to, to step up and to make things more rapidly. So is it something that we can consider? Do you have some examples? For example, I don't know, from Nepal, just to convert this, findings, materials from IPBES, IPCC into practical things directly?
I think we don't have one straight answer, as also David said that there is a very limited responsivity from, so once we produce that policy and then when the ministers commit to some actions, we the countries are committed to make the policies, but when it comes down to translate at the local level, then there needs a lot of capacity building, sensitization, so because it's also funding. So, but with efforts, I think it's possible. So I can give you example also of LAPA. LAPA is local adaptation plan of action. So when we prepared the LAPA for Nepal, we got the local experience from the ground. But when we are implementing this, we are implementing with the smallest unit at the village level. So with that one, I think it's very important that when we think of the local global assessment and everything, it has to translate down back to the local at the very small administrative unit of any country. Otherwise, people will not feel what's going on because it's a very complex world. And then to do that, the awareness, I would feel the funding, capacity building, it's very important. And then before implementing, it's also important to have them on board. The actors need to be very on board during the implementation. And then I think this local action plan would be very important when we go translate all the policies back to the local level. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I only wanted to add to those who have spoken before me that it's also very important to note that both also in IPBES, the member states and the other bodies of IPBES are now searching for a way how to improve the policy support. And this is one of the great achievements, I would say, from IPBES, that it's not focusing on the assessments only, but has some other major objectives. And one is policy support. And this has been for review and for, as I say, revitalization somehow. And I'm looking forward actually to the discussions that will take place in IPBES 11 when we discuss the policy support. And there I see one path, it might be, or one tool, the fact sheets. And then again, the Nexus assessment is quite nice in a way that it might actually speak to specific sectors directly. So it might be easier than in other assessments that are much more complex to transport, that if you have fact sheets that speak a more easy language potentially than an SPM only, that you can address key people that then implement or inspire action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Regrettably, I won't be able to take any more questions. I don't want to take time from the next speakers. If you could please join me in thanking the panelists, and feel free to chase them if you have any further questions. Thank you.
A bit of a European perspective and the role you foresee for BioAgora as you're leading the monitoring demonstration case.
Thanks, Jutta. Thanks all the people that came here to this session. So the idea is that I'm part of the BioAgora. So BioAgora is a kind of trying to move forward a science policy interface, or this kind of mixture between science in Europe, how to mobilize the science to inform policy. So rather than just explain what exactly the science service is, which is the concept that BioAgora is trying to involve, I think that the monitoring is quite a good example of this. Because for sure, I mean, not only we have the GBF, we implement the GBF at the national level, and Europe is taking that seriously with a lot of legislations that are already in place, and we need already to monitor and evaluate. And for that, we need data. So we have a diagnostic that's okay. But to monitor the effectiveness of the measure in place, we need information. And in the terms of biodiversity, Europe has a lot of information. The problem is that it's quite dispersed, it's quite fragmented, and then there is a mismatch between the needs and the actual information that is available. So the monitoring framework and the monitoring panorama in Europe is quite a good example. And what I wanted to do here is a more like, so where the science service is, what is using as an example to try to build from, and this is all the process that led to the proposal of the ebook, which is the European Biodiversity Observation Coordination Center. So what is the travel? So we have this problem, we have this issue, we have fragmentation, we have, but we know that there is data. So there was a process, there's been a process, a very inclusive process that run and coordinated by some European projects, also like EuropaBond, but with partners that have been also mentioned here, that Biodiversa Plus, other European projects, a lot of stakeholders, and led by the KCBD and the Commission to try to mobilize all these stakeholders and then have a common diagnostic of the barriers, problems that actually limit this integration of information, this practical use of the information, which is actually the basis for any science service. So what are those problems that have been identified in more generally? So in the quest towards this ebook idea, and there's been a lot of fragmentation. So there is data, there is a lot of information about data. So we could deal with some of the information that it would be required, but this fragmentation is like hampered by lack of coordination. So we need coordination that is not at the right levels. And the policy mandates of these coordinations, especially also in Europe, is very fragmented because you have all these different countries with different initiatives. And therefore, it's not a lack of effort. It's not even like a lack of investment. There is a lack of actual coordination. So everybody knew, but all these discussions actually in a common framework, I think that is quite kind of important in terms what the science policy process is. I think this emphasis on the process is very important. Makes that all the people recognize not only the diagnostic but the needs to move forward. So therefore, there's been this kind of the diagnostic in terms of what might be needed. Also, there are gaps, of course. There are gaps in geographic gaps, taxonomic gaps, in some EBB, some essential biodiversity variables in terms of some biological elements that are not covered, that like genetic diversity. We'll hear more about later probably. Genetic diversity, we have a lot of gaps. But again, there are some effort, but there is no enough coordination to set the priorities of what is the next gap to be covered and in which geographic and taxonomic scope. So all this was analyzed in this kind of process, and then the ebook proposal has been launched. And now we have a kind of diagnostic, also shared proposal of what might be the next step. The next step is this kind of European Biodiversity, European Coordination Center that start bridging these together, and also having that kind of building a tool that it can be connected to, so that the information that it will fit the restoration law to the different needs from the Commission, it's delivered, and also can be mobilized in terms of the indicators that might be needed. But without a collective endeavor, that's going to be very difficult. So there is this kind of a challenge of addressing this filling these gaps and this enhanced coordination that actually will allow to fit into the needs of the global framework. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Luis. Katie, to you, and how this is related to your work in GeoBon and to look for an ambitious standard for biodiversity monitoring. What do you think how scientific research could be utilized to support governments in enhancing their national implementation and monitoring of the GBF?
Yeah, that's a very loaded and difficult question, but I think the simple answer is people and people working together. It's as easy and as hard as that. In the European level, we had Europabon at GeoBon, so I represent GeoBon, and the secretariat is based in Montreal. And what we have is we have a bit of internal structure that is kind of informally managed. So we work and operate at different levels of biodiversity observation networks. So we have national networks, we have regional networks, and we have thematic networks that specialize on particular elements of biodiversity in particular places in the world. What we see is that it's becoming so much more important that we're all working together, because we all believe in this same capacity and ability and importance for biodiversity monitoring. But what's lacking is this strong community of practice and looking at our peers and saying and knowing that we need to work together, because we're not going to achieve any of this together. So the IPBES is one mechanism, but also we can work in our local governments as well to push things like the standardization of data, like essential biodiversity variables that we have developed mostly through the work of our leads in Europabon about, what are the essential and minimal metrics of biodiversity that is necessary to understand how it's changing and why it's changing. And the standardized approach is the way we can link ourselves regionally and also across different elements of biodiversity. I can give one example, actually, like Sean Hoban is in the room. He's one of the co-leads of the Genetic Diversity Working Group. And previous to this COP, so at COP15, we did not see genetic diversity in the GBF Kunming-Montreal Global Framework, nor was it in the monitoring framework. And at the time, genetic diversity, we all know it's important. It's the foundation of species diversity, but the GBF doesn't recognize it beyond just cultivated crop species, things with economic purpose. And in order to increase the conservation of biodiversity, we need to preserve genetic diversity. So Sean and his team, they just purely voluntary work, were able to connect with national focal points, people in their countries. They actually went and just started conversations and started just with the message of the importance of genetic diversity. And lo and behold, we have a higher standard for genetic diversity at a global level, and I think we all recognize that it's truly important to conserve. Another thing, though, that an example in Canada is that we're also trying to coordinate ourselves internally at a government level. So we have different regions that and different departments that are trying to work to conserve biodiversity. But one thing that we'd like to see happen is have much more coordinated efforts within Canada. So one project that we've been invited to participate in Canada is in the James Bay lowlands. So if you look at the map of Canada, there's like this U shape, and that's the Hudson Bay, and that whole coastline is all peatland. It's an area it's bigger than Romania. I think it's bigger than Poland, and it has immense amounts of carbon, and it also has such unique biodiversity. And the government has a mandate to protect this area and create a new conservation area, dually preserving biodiversity but also conserving carbon. So this requires this also in area of indigenous territories. So you've got carbon, biodiversity, and now social and indigenous territories. So how do you coordinate all of these things? And what we've done and what I think we're learning from this is that we need to develop a framework, like what we talked about in the last session, that having a framework to unite all of these people and people working on different things is so important. So we had indigenous communities, scientists, all government officials as well, from Stats Canada, from Fisheries and Oceans, to come to a room and talk about these things. And I was in this meeting, and there was one gentleman from the indigenous community that lives there, and they don't have a word for carbon. Like they don't understand what that is. So they didn't really understand why would you want to protect it and conserve it. But really, when you explain, he came back, when we explained to him from a scientific standpoint what is carbon, he basically said, oh, that's just the earth breathing. It's just in the atmosphere, it comes and goes. So he created a new native word for carbon so that they could communicate on a local level with their local people what we're trying to do. So it's a constant communication, it's a constant dialogue, and then working with your national focal points is so important, and connecting everyone essentially. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it really sounds like we need all hands on deck. Alice, taking up on that, how would you think we could better strengthen the collaboration between governments and scientists on the national level to work better together and to help the national biodiversity monitoring systems?
So, like Katie, I'm going to take this from a couple of different angles. Firstly, it's essential to realize that for a good monitoring framework, we need the right data. And traditionally, scientists have not engaged in this space. My first COP, and many of you will have been to much earlier COPs than I have, was CBD COP13. At that point, we barely had any academics in the room. Having real data is essential for monitoring biodiversity accurately. And so not only do scientists need to engage with policy better, but the scientists need to start actually realizing that there is a necessary place for them in these rooms. Organizations like GeoBon are there to facilitate that dialogue, to make sure that we have the data we need to take us forward towards goals. In order to develop effective, efficient, and reliable metrics for monitoring, we need to know that we have the right data. That can only be done with the engagement of scientists. So let's go back to the monitoring framework for just a moment. Many of us as scientists sitting in the room are not happy with many of the indicators that were selected. Whilst they were meant to fulfill a smart remit, many of them are not specific enough. Many of them are not time-bound, or they will not allow us to measure with granularity our movement towards targets, which really undermines our ability to move towards them in a timely manner. One of the only exceptions to that are the genetic indicators. And the reason for that is that there was an acknowledgement that we didn't have good genetic indicators within the early renditions of what the indicators look like. It's very important to realize that the CBD is meant to look at 3 levels of diversity: the diversity of ecosystems, species, and genes. And yet everyone seems to consider that genetic diversity is just going to be too hard to measure. It's complicated, it's hard to grasp. And so how do we develop an indicator that both delivers us the accuracy and the specificity of information we need to safeguard genetic diversity without being too complicated or too expensive to monitor. And so the CCG, the Coalition of Conservation Genetics, tried to find that pragmatic balance between something that would deliver us enough accuracy without scaring governments away on something that would be completely impractical to operate at a national level, because ultimately any indicator has to make sense at a national level. And that is why the headline indicator of the proportion of populations with over 500 individuals was chosen, because it's something that is relatively easy to monitor, and yet it is scientifically rigorous. The next question is, how do you get governments on board? You have a novel concept. How do you actually demonstrate to governments that this is something that is workable at the national scale? And this is why having a diverse network with members in multiple different member states is important, because they can go to their focal points, they can get that data at a national level to get proof of concept, and they can show how this can contribute to NBSAPs, to national plans. When you have governments advocating for something, that is where work goes forward, because this is a convention of the parties. That means unless you have parties championing these indicators and understanding them, nothing is going to happen. And so then we get to the COP. We've had the working group working with their focal points in the time before the COP, but then it comes to the floor. You still only have a minority of parties that know what it is. That's when it comes to not just to scientific briefings to get the scientific community on board, but developing things like policy briefs, distributing them in diverse languages, as well as going along to the contact groups and ensuring that parties have the information they need to understand that this is something that will work in their country. Ultimately, it comes down to communication and collaboration. It comes down to developing pragmatic targets that strike that balance between something that will work and will also deliver us the data. For that, we need the liaison between scientists and between parties. We need more scientists to be in rooms like these to make sure that those messages go to the people who need to hear them. The reality is that most of our indicators are not good enough. The ones that are there because of the concerted work of groups like the Coalition on Conservation Genetics. And in the years to come, using other parts of the GeoBond network, I'm also part of APBON, the Asia Pacific Biodiversity Observation Network, to make sure that we have this data across a diversity of ecosystems and regions, as well as having representative data across species, is also going to be essential. And for those of you who want to know more about the Coalition of Conservation Genetics, they have a booth, go and talk there. They also have an event at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning in the IUCN Pavilion. So go and engage more, because we need the engagement of everyone here to take it to the next step.
Thank you very much, Alice. Quickly to Gregoire, who has to leave to a competing event very soon. So I have two questions for you. If we have all this in place, how can we turn monitoring into knowledge mobilization, directly related to your being the leader of the Knowledge Center for Biodiversity? And the second question would be, how can we support member states and countries, especially those with lower resources, to implement their monitoring strategies and turn this into knowledge?
Okay, I didn't spot that one. I never read questions that people are sending me before a meeting because I don't tend to not listen to my partners here. So, okay, that's the questions I have to address. Actually, it's a really, really nice discussions here. I'm actually European Commission. The Knowledge Center for Biodiversity is one of the new bodies of the Commission. And why has it been put in place? Because they really wanted to have an interface, more solid interface, a single interface with the scientific community to get support on biodiversity. And I stress it's the Knowledge Center for Biodiversity, so it's our role, my role, to make sure that biodiversity is on the table of all the policymakers. So one thing is to provide scientific evidence to questions that we can already anticipate. We already know the competition for land is there, and we will get a huge number of questions related to the different decisions that we will have to take. For this, of course, we need data. But the issue here, and I think the real issue of the discussions here, is that all these things are always project-based. I mean, we are here quite a number of projects that are around, and this has been, I think, poisoning everything for the last 20 years. And I already see quite a change in that. In the past, these projects were funded, the data were released and often lost. Documents were ending in scientific journals, and then you pass on to the next project. Here, I see a slow evolution from a continuity in projects and an institutionalization of projects. And I think this is quite a game changer. This is where the Knowledge Center can actually really help. This European Biodiversity Observation Coordination Center that we are putting on the table, it's on paper at the moment. It's a concept. We don't know what it's going to be, how it's going to be built. You have proposed a plan with EU Pavillion. It's in the hands of the Commission. It's going to be tested. But without the institutionalization, it's going to be another project that will be ending. So I think where we really need to work is making sure that there's a continuity in the dialogue between the scientific community and the policymakers. And we have started to create these rooms. BioAgora is one of these places where we help to develop the interfaces, the mechanisms for exchanges. You are already pushing for exactly the same messages, that there's really a need to create this culture. This needs to be really really carved in stone and maintained over time. It's extremely challenging. We have IPBES that has appeared, but these are again one example. So they produce a new report. If you have to start a report again in 3 years' time, there will be new researchers. We will start again over and over. So we need to create really processes, and this is where the data will be, the management of the data, the access to the data will be key. All these data sets that we use are still in the hands mainly of NGOs, of volunteers. Very little are really coming because there's a regulation forcing people to monitor certain things, and this is where we're still extremely fragile. So GeoBond, for example, is doing really a game changer in at least providing a proposal and orchestrating different actors that are key in providing the data. But without the scientific community, without the technical support, because you still need quite heavy machinery to manage that, without the mandate and without the funding, these are the 4 ingredients that you need to focus on. So everybody is always bringing one of the ingredients, but they never work together. So this is a thing where we really need to work harder as a community to make sure that this is really happening. And I think the Knowledge Center for Biodiversity is a first step in making sure that these things become more and more instrumentalized, that people are really committed for the longer term to really establish systems. It's going to be super complicated because it's like a fractal dimensions, these are national networks. The colleague from Congo there is challenged, has knowledge with the communities, as he said, so how to bring this up. We cannot put rules and laws everywhere, but we need to create this culture and making sure that this is really institutionalized, but not only in the legal text, with really as a cultural process. And this is where we have a lot of work to do. And this is, of course, where we start from, is the data, is the information. This is where it starts, of course. And this needs to be really respected and considered. And we are getting there, but not fast enough, of course. So I tried to address, there was another question on funding, right? No.
How we would support countries with lower resources.
I should look at Gilles because he's funding he's the research part. No. Yeah, good question. I have no idea. I think the first thing is to make sure that people understand really the value of what we lose in terms of finance. I mean, a lot of my work, of the work of the team, is actually documenting the impact of biodiversity loss, so that and assessing the impact of biodiversity loss on finance, so that people finally realize that they need to cherish the information, that they need the information to move forward, so that this becomes a priority. In the EU level, I have no idea how to make sure that we can only help, and GeoBond is again a very good example. There is no excuse, to be honest, nowadays there's no excuse for not doing something. We have free imagery, we have amazing infrastructures, we make sure that I've been a big fan of all the apps, open access tools and fair principles for making sure that all this information is available. So information is there. Very often, Gilles hates me for that. I often say we have the research, we have the science. We need to take the right decision. So stop funding research and take the right decisions. That would be my summary. But no, honestly, we do have already a lot of things to start from. It's really where we need to work again is at the institutional level to make sure that the tools, the elements are there to move forward. Of course, there are many gaps there. There's so much to be done, but again, we need to make sure that the foundation are more solid than they're not at the moment, or not enough at the moment.
If I may, Well, first of all, I have to say that there will be a new commission starting probably on the 1st of December. The political guidelines of this next commission have been published in July, and they follow the will of EU citizens, so the result of the EU elections. So the priorities are more on competitiveness, startups, jobs. There will be less on pure biodiversity, unfortunately, but that's it. If we have less research on biodiversity, I will have less things to do, so cool, but no, it's a joke. So yeah, we know that there will be less budget on research for biodiversity. We know that. It's coming. So, and already for the work program 26-27, we know that. So for us, it's really to find the most priority projects. That's one thing. The second thing is that it's not only DG research funding research on biodiversity. You have also specific studies, short projects funded by other DGs like DG Env. And also, I don't know if there are some colleagues from INPA, when there was the big announcement of President von der Leyen at COP15 that the EU is doubling the money for biodiversity, it was actually to double the money for INPA. And so at INPA there is more money, and there are also some research angles. And last point, I agree with you, of course, as always, Grégoire, there is already a lot. And if we want to succeed on a global scale, it's a message that we are sending. All countries should join GBIF. They should join IUCN. They should see what they can do with GeoBon, so that we have more data and that we can then use also all the Earth observation networks, etc. So I don't know exactly how INPA could help on that. So it's more a question for INPA, but there are still possibilities to advance. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to close. We are
Can I make a very brief comment just following?
Very brief. 3
Okay.
words.
Slightly more than 3 words, but very brief. So I think a message we do need to convey: biodiversity always takes second priority to the economy, to short-term goals. We have to move away from that model. One of the biggest economic shocks we have had in decades is the pandemic. The pandemic very likely is a result of mismanagement of the environment. We will see more spillover. We will see a higher risk of pandemics unless we change the way we operate. That means investing in the research we need to make sure we have a healthy environment. Because if we have a healthy environment, we will have a healthier economy. And so this is an investment in all of our futures. We have a new working group at GeoBon. We have the One Health working group. We are trying to work towards these things. So we need to convey that so that we can all move forward more securely and better together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists, and now be quick.